Just wait.
Good morning. Yeah. Good morning. Today is the Wednesday regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. And today we have our work session on our strategic plan, and we have a work session on the Oregon Health Authority's procurement process for the coordinated care organizations. And I know we have some executive session. So Mr. Mokrahysky, under the category of adjustments to the agenda, I was kind of thinking we would just march through it the way it is, the work session and then the other work session, and then the, if any, review of assignments, and then executive session.
It's a great idea.
Okay, good. Do we have any idea of what our executive session estimate would be today?
The time estimate?
Yeah.
I don't.
Maybe
Let me check
between,
on that.
yeah, between the two work sessions, maybe we could get an update on
Let me
that.
check on that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I'll ask Ms. Williams and anyone else that's going to be involved in the work session to come forward. It's just you and Steve?
Yeah, at the moment, my plan was just to do a quick presentation and then call up each of the
Okay,
presenters.
so at this time we will formally convene item 2A, the work session on the strategic plan annual work session, and Ms. Williams and Mr. Mokrahysky will be the people starting out. Ms. Williams is our strategy and integration manager. Mr. Mokrahysky, of course, is the Lane County Administrator. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. So this is just kind of an overview of what the work session, my plan was for today. So really have a quick discussion on the review, the development of the strategic plan, overview, some of the steps that we've taken after adoption of the plan, some of the progress that we've made towards tracking all of the items, and then we're going to call up 4 individuals to do a presentation, kind of highlight 4 areas specifically in the plan.
And do we have in mind that the presentation would be about half of this 90 minutes and the board questions and comments would be about half?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. So my goal is I have about 15 minutes, and then I would turn it over to each one for about a 3 to 5 minute discussion, and then we have at least 45 minutes for the remainder, open discussion or walk through any updates.
Thank you.
And then I just put up a quote here, Pablo Picasso, our goals can only be reached through a vehicle of a plan in which we must fervently believe and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success. And I just thought that was fitting in terms of we really try to pride ourselves on this as a living, breathing document. We do quarterly updates. We're all, every meeting that I go to, we're all, recognizing the work that we do is focused on a bigger, broader plan that we're all working towards. And then, speaking of Pablo Picasso, there's a picture there. This is one of the activities that we did during the kickoff event for the strategic plan and the visioning exercise. And so one of our, I believe it was Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, that drew this lovely picture, but just kind of doing that visioning process.
No, it was our group.
Your group.
Yeah.
But Dan had the pen in hand. That's definitely not my drawing.
And you determined that there was some relationship between that drawing and Picasso?
Dan Hurley is our
Different
main
style.
Picasso, a little different, but the artistic vibe there.
It's like a 3.2.
And then, so just a reminder, we kicked this off in actually December of 2017. So knowing that we were going to update our plan, we focused in December on the community focus groups, reaching out to the community, reaching out to staff. What are you interested in the next 3 years? And then January we kicked off with the help of Portland State to review. We had an RFP and they were successful and worked through the process. And so that involved a very collaborative effort with focus groups, surveys of community members, staff, reaching out to the Spanish community as well. Several open houses. This is a picture of, again, had this before, but just the visual of where we've gotten a lot of the feedback from our community, and a community session that took place for one of the focus groups. So we did adopt a plan in March, and that was a quick kind of 3-month process to really get a very collaborative effort in place. And so I believe it was a year ago today, March 20th, that we adopted it. So we've been really busily working on a lot of progress to date, and so I'll go over that briefly. And again, just another overview, as we did also identify the priorities, initiatives. We really did also look within and reviewed our vision, our mission, and values. And again, the vision, Lane County is recognized as the best county to live, work, and play. Mission, we responsibly manage available resources to deliver vital, community-centered services with passion, drive, and focus. We also added our new purpose, which is to improve lives. Our values were, I think we had 7 values before, and as part of the survey aspect with employees, we brought that down to the 3 new values of integrity, excellence, equity, and respect. And then added our new core behaviors as well, the passion to serve, driven to connect, and focus on solutions. And these are all woven into the strategic plan and throughout the communication of the strategic plan as well. Again, just another overview, as we do have 4 priority areas: safe, healthy county, vibrant communities, robust infrastructure, and our people and partnerships. Within those priorities, we have 13 initiatives, and those are summarized in the one-pager, which is attachment B for anybody following along, or for your documents. That's broken out in attachment A, page 5, and this is our one-pager. So it's really a summary of what those initiatives are. So for Safe, Healthy County, we have initiatives around affordable housing and homelessness, behavioral and community health, public safety funding and service delivery, and incarceration and recidivism. And in the vibrant communities, these are really the kind of the 3 E's: the economy, our natural environment, and equity. So initiatives around those three areas. And robust infrastructure is really looking at safe transportation, our facilities, and maintenance and management of our facilities, and then any new facility development. And then finally, our people and partnerships. Those initiatives are really geared towards fiscal resilience, operational effectiveness, employee engagement and resilience, and enhanced partnerships. Some of the steps that we've taken after adoption is really to roll out the communication of that plan. And so a lot of documents, materials were made. We have some of the logos, boards put in this room, and also the rollout of the strategic plan to at least 25 or more of our work groups. So really reaching out to all of the work groups in the county, our county administrator going to all of those work groups and really telling the story and sharing the message of our strategic plan. We also tackled the how are we going to track this? So really putting the time and effort in the beginning on developing a plan, as we have these 4 priorities, 13 initiatives, 47 activity areas under each of all of those. So how do we track this, communicate this, and really guide the message throughout the next 3 years in relation to those items? We also initiated a process to continually collaborate and communicate. So we do, every quarter we meet with the priority areas, all the leads for each priority area, and have some really good discussions on how are things going in your area related to Safe Healthy County or vibrant communities, and really share shared stories, some of the successes, if there's any challenges. And there's a really great discussions where we're learning a lot and kind of keeping the progress moving, and then updating work plans and so forth. And those are just, again, to share a quick story, just as we were talking with Safe and Healthy county quarterly discussion. It was really, I think our first one where the sheriff, I believe, was mentioning how essential collaboration is, and it was really nice as we're all sharing stories in one priority area, just that recognition of we collaborate so well at Lane County and in terms, especially with the safe, healthy county aspect in the public health and public safety and all of our departments, the collaboration is really incredible. So to have that collaborative effort to communicate through the strategic plan has been really exciting as well. So we meet every quarter, and then we follow that up with quarterly director meetings to kind of, are there any issues that we need to notice? What are some of the successes we want to highlight, and so forth. And then we've progressed on many items throughout, and you'll hear some of those stories shared when we bring forward some of the guests today. But just very briefly, like 4B3, which is our people and partnerships, surrounded on engagement and moving things forward, was really focused on aligning our core values and our core behaviors, and weaving them through training efforts, new employee orientation at the county, all of our performance evaluations. We've really had that focus to deliver the core behaviors and values, and that's one that's really completed. We do have it out there as we're still monitoring it, because we want to follow up and do surveys and see, are you feeling like you're getting the message through some of the trainings and through evaluations. So a lot of great success throughout, but that's just one aspect. Another item, 4C2, which is around our people and partnerships, and also kind of the operations. And that was to collaborate and share tools with our partners, external partners. And we've had some really great success there in terms of not only kind of the data-related collaborations that we currently do with Eugene, Springfield, LCOG, and continually collaborating and sharing tools there, but we've also had the University of Oregon Policy Lab. That's been a great success out of this particular strategy, and we can either have a presentation later on in the year regarding that. We did at the, I believe in the budget committee sessions, kind of did a presentation on what the University Policy Lab idea is, and but it's been an exciting venture to watch grow as the students there are really tackling 10 weeks. They have a student team to really delve into what are some of these issues that we're working at the county, and really have that good shared collaboration there. And then briefly, I'm hoping to just follow through some of the tracking, as we have a lot of material in the packet for you today, and if anybody was following along, I've broken it out into attachments in the packet, and essentially attachment A is what we talked about as the overview one-pager. Attachment B really lines all of the details like this that's up on the screen, where we're really getting into every priority, every initiative, every activity area. And so I thought I would just run through one so that anybody following along can see how things move and are visually displayed through some of these. So for instance, looking at the Lane Event Center and some of the work focused around improving that site and looking at future growth opportunities. This is one item, 3B4, and so this is how one would look up this item. So we've got 3 is the robust infrastructure priority. And as you can see, there's a couple examples under initiatives, A and B. So this is a B aspect. And then item number 4, which is develop a Lane County Event Center business plan to maximize flexibility, attract new events, and increase revenue. And then you can see who the lead is assigned for this item. And then as we go throughout attachment C, you have a lot of one-pagers. And so this is really all of those 47 activity areas combined into one document, so that you could go and look up 3B4 and see what what's a little bit more detail around the Lane Events Center business plan. And you can pull up that one pager. So I tried to highlight, where you would find the 3B4 on this one pager. We have an opportunity to update some of the progress in the middle section of that one pager. And then the status gets updated too as people move forward with progress. There's a percentage breakdown of the success throughout, and that averages into an overall status that you see towards the bottom. So that yellow triangle is really the average overall progress on that one particular item. And then those roll up into this one pager that you're familiar with seeing on a quarterly basis. But it's just a good one pager that folks can have as a quick reminder as we have a lot of these initiatives. What are some summaries on specific activity areas and what's the status for each of those? And so you can see that 3B4 related to the Lane Event Center is highlighted there as that yellow box. So I know this isn't very legible, but I wanted to put it up there as you have the material in your packet, and we try to make that available to you on a quarterly basis. But I just wanted to take a little bit of time to explain some of that paperwork that you have. So again, this is attachment D for anybody following along on page 55. That walks through that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to a few folks to come up to the table and do a quick update on specific items. So the first one, 1A2, we have Steve Manila to talk about the varied housing options addressing homelessness.
Did you say 1A?
1A.
Good morning. I'm Steve Manella. I'm the Human Services Manager here at Lane County, and it's my pleasure to update you on our activity area around housing and homelessness. And I can tell you that there has been no rest for the team here at Lane County, and we're making much progress in all of the areas, all of the projects that we've listed in our scoreboard. They are currently green, meaning that we're actively making progress. So I'll start off with talking about the 51-unit MLK Commons to be built at the Behavioral Health Center on MLK. And the most recent update on that is that we have, with our partners Homes for Good, we've secured all of the funding for that supportive housing project for chronically homeless, frequent users of our public safety and healthcare systems. And in addition, it's been a fantastic private-public partnership in that we capped off the fundraising or resource development for the project by obtaining over $3 million in support from the healthcare sector. So when oftentimes these projects are financed just with public dollars and with bonding, this has been a real success to show our partnership with healthcare and the impact that the project will have both on the healthcare system and the public safety system. The other thing I want to mention about that is something coming back to the board, coming attraction, is that we're looking at a closing in, the Homes for Good is looking at a closing in June and then groundbreaking in July. And prior to the closing, Homes for Good will be bringing forward an MOU with Lane County, and that MOU specifically will cover, one of the things we have to guarantee to the investors is that we're going to provide services to the people at the MLK building. And what's a little bit different about housing finance is with the bonding finance, it's a 15-year kind of deal. And they want us to say that in the spirit of the agreement that we intend to provide services to that site over the 15 years. And so, and that's easily accomplished because we have our behavioral health center adjacent to the housing complex. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing that is happening and is really supercharged is people have been calling this the TAC report. What it is our homeless and housing system transformation. At this point, we have a steering committee that will begin meeting this month. The steering committee includes City Councilor Claire Surratt, Mayor Lucy Venice, Commissioner Farr, Commissioner Buck, Pat Walsh, who's with the Poverty and Homelessness Board, Chris McAllister, Steve Mokerheisky, and then John Reese. And what we'll be doing during the next month is that we'll be looking at the specific activities that we need to accomplish in order to launch the improvements to our service delivery and housing for homeless people. Another exciting piece that we did during the past year is the housing improvement plan. Lane County gave out over $2 million in grants to create over 100 units of supportive housing to 5 different projects, and those projects ranged from everything from projects for youth aging out of foster care to homeless mentally ill folks to veterans. We have projects in the rural part of Lane County, and that ended up being a very successful venture, and we're in the process of putting out contracts now for the development of those projects. Other highlights for the year are we received a 5-year grant from the SAMHSA, which is part of Federal Health and Human Services, and that grant is going to allow us to continue our frequent user service engagement program, which targets, again, folks that are overutilizing our public safety and healthcare systems. And over the course of the next 5 years, we'll receive over $400,000 a year from the federal government, as well as the money that we have budgeted in state funds and from our partners such as Trillium, and move forward in putting more folks into supportive housing. Finally, we were successful again in receiving HUD Continuum of Care grant, and that is the basis of support for much of our supportive housing in Lane County. And that provides a foundation for our staff to do this work. Finally, the last piece is really the coming attractions piece that I wanted to talk about, because the momentum for what we're working on is building. During this past year, we've had a very good partnership with the City of Eugene. Last month, a team of folks from the city and the county received an award from LCOG for our outstanding work as an intergovernmental team on Cap 99, and then on the transition to the Dawn to Dawn or New Dawn program, which is housing over 240 homeless people currently as we speak. And that partnership is really the basis for us to move forward with the transformation that we look at in how we use our housing, how we move people through, create better efficiency, and create more housing. So I think you'll see during the next year that the plans will be very ambitious. We're working with Homes for Good, and we hope to bring back to the board a MOU around something we've been talking about for the last couple of years, which is a supportive housing projects for families that are involved in the child welfare system, families that have been homeless. We've been talking about doing that on a site that is adjacent to the fairgrounds. And then additionally, I think that as part of our Fuse discussion, we have a goal of 350 units of supportive housing, and I think that we're going to get more intensely into what are the financing tools that we need to really accomplish that over the course of the next few years. So with that, that gives you a broad overview. I hope I haven't gone over time, but there's much to report.
Good, thank you.
And I just wanted to say, we have time if you wanted to ask questions of each presenter.
I think I'd like to make sure that your presentation is within the 45 minutes first.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that means we
Okay.
can't.
So let's just
Thank
keep
you.
our questions, I've been writing mine down, I'm gonna pepper them away.
Thank you, Steve. So next, we have Sarah Means up here to talk about economic development in relation to the vibrant communities aspect, specifically to A5.
Good morning. So as Judy mentioned earlier, this document, the strategic plan, is really meant to be an evolving document, and I would say that particularly in this area, the area that community and economic development has been responsible, we've even evolved to date in streamlining and more effectively and efficiently communicating the strategies related to community and economic development. So investing in a resilient, diverse, and sustainable regional economy is really the key strategic initiative that falls under the purview of community and economic development. And the one area that we thought would be good to update the board on today is really around this concept of monitoring, implementing, investing in business innovation and regional economic development opportunities for the area. And there's two projects really that I felt would be ripe in presenting to the board today in the 3 to 5 minutes that we have. And so the first one is Goshen. The prior board received a lot of information around this topic. This is really 10 years worth of work, if not more, from multiple departments across the county, land management and then community and economic development, primarily speaking. But really, it's a key regional community and economic development project in Commissioner Buck's district, and probably worthy of additional conversation with this board at some point in the near future. But to bring you up to speed, at least at the high level, last fall we were authorized to proceed with the next step in work in doing some preliminary engineering and planning work for wastewater services to Goshen. For just maybe to step back and give a little bit of a background, this unincorporated community just south of the metro area, 320 approximately industrially zoned acres, all privately held at this point, lacks some critical infrastructure, wastewater being at the top of that list. So this is why we're focusing on wastewater for the time being. We've had a pretty long relationship with Kennedy Jinks, which is an engineering firm that has done most of the work for the wastewater component leading up to now, and so we continued down a path with them to continue on with the preliminary planning and engineering work. We also were fortunate, actually it was the first board meeting of the year under consent calendar. This board approved the county administrator to go after a grant from Business Oregon, technical assistance grant. We were awarded that grant, so that will help offset some of the costs related to this initial step in doing some engineering work. Kennedy Jinks is actively working on the project, doing some cost estimations, updating the cost estimates to current dollars, and then we'll dive into some conceptual design for pumping stations, force main pipelines and such. And then we'll be going through a regulatory process as well. So all positive steps in a direction that will eventually culminate in some engineering construction documents for us to then consider. So that's Goshen. The other regionally significant project that I wanted to bring to your attention is Glenwood. This is something that we're certainly invested in terms of understanding that this is a critically important regionally significant project. City of Springfield is clearly on the lead, or in the lead with regard to the work being done, but Lane County remains an active partner in the conversation. So anybody who has driven through Glenwood in the last year or so has seen the reconstruction of Franklin Boulevard. That was completed in mid-2018. The city has completed acquisition of some key parcels, key riverfront parcels, and that happened in late fall of last year. They're working on construction and design documents for interior infrastructure in Glenwood that'll come off of the Franklin Boulevard corridor. They're now designed at 60%. The Springfield Urban Renewal Agency, CEDA is the acronym there, will begin to meet and approve some request for qualification documents on that particular project in the coming months. And site promotion is anticipated to begin later this spring. So those are just two specific activities that I wanted to update you on. Again, there's a lot more going on in this area, but it's all great work, and we're excited on the progress that's being made. So thank you.
Next, we have Greg Rickoff to discuss a little bit more about 3C2, which is related to relocation efforts of parole and probation.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, and now for something completely different. This item stemmed from a board work session and tour of parole and probation last summer, as the board recognized the current space is far from ideal for parole and probation. The space is not sufficient in terms of size, safety, and access. It was designed to be part of the Community Corrections Center, and we have it from the Sheriff's Office that should parole and probation move out, that the Community Corrections Center would attempt to use it as quickly as possible, that they have overflow needs, they have demands that would repurpose that facility. It's about 11,000 square feet space, and studies show that we need a minimum of about 15,000 square feet. We retained GMA Architects last year, and they really did a tremendous job, cost-effective job to study the issue, to really engage stakeholders, fully engaged all members of parole and probation to look at the needs, and to kind of ground us in a deep understanding. We did retain for a short while a realtor and identified space. Do understand that we had about 1% of the metropolitan area available to us for consideration. We needed sites that were appropriately zoned, that were away from any services to children, and that had good access to public transit, since that's the way a lot of the clients move about, and then had access to parking. All of our parole and probation officers, of course, visit clients at their homes and their places of work, so they're a mobile lot. So we're looking for sites that would have that would meet all those criteria. We have it down to 2 sites, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on those sites at this point, just because we've really not started any kind of negotiation or communication with the communities in which those sites reside. One is in the Bethel area, near Bethel area in a commercial district with good access to public transit, and the other is in Springfield, and again in a commercial area with good access. At this phase of the operation, with these 2 sites in play, we've made approaches. In both cases, they're interested in remodeling and leasing to us the property, once the remodels are complete. In one case, the owner's interested in perhaps selling if the price is right, and the other case, it would be a lease-only option. So GMA now has, with those two sites, they're taking it to preliminary design. At that point, we're going to we'll bring somebody on board for a costing model, and we will really understand what, our initial costs are one thing. Knowing what the ongoing costs are is going to be critically important for parole and probation, particularly with the state pass-through funding. So a lot remains to be done, but I would say we've made great progress. It's been an actively engaged team, working very well with all the stakeholders, and look forward to getting both the preliminary design and the costing. Judy's been part of that effort. I don't have specific timelines for you when we might see the designs back. Have you heard anything?
I believe in the next month, they're really focusing and working on it, so within the next month or two.
So it's unlikely to happen this fiscal year, but I would say, we have 6 to 9 months before we're in a new home, but it's really made some pretty significant progress. And with your permission, I'll stay at the table in case there's questions later on.
Okay, probably will be.
Thank you. And so next we have Mike Finch, Micah Brown, and Deanna Smith here to talk about 4C1, which is within our people and partnerships related to enhancing data availability.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So I love this one. It's our people and partnerships. So I'm pleased to bring some of our people and partnership with doing technology services and HHS up to the table as we present this item. Presenting today, we've all probably heard the term SMART used for something: smartphone, smart house, smart community, and in that modern term, smart community. In the context of the discussion today, SMART meaning data-driven decision making, and so it's SMART means using that data and that information that Lane County has and our partners have to drive the best decisions possible for policy, growth, and resiliency in our community. So as part of this effort, this item, there are 3 areas. There's establishing a vision and a strategy, there's tools and technology, and there's a data warehouse. And so in establishing those and capitalizing this vision for data-driven decision-making or what we're calling our 3D vision, we've established a new team this year called Data Governance, which has been working together to create a culture within Lane County of data sharing, stewardship, skill set development, and adoption of modern tools to help us achieve this data-driven decision-making vision. Lane County is also working hard to support open data efforts in our community that honor the need for zero barrier abilities to share and access our data in our community. Lane County has partnered with the University of Oregon on a study of open data and how it's being made available and consumable in communities across the United States to help us identify the most valuable information to start with. We're also working with organizations like the Technology Association of Oregon in our community to participate in community discussions around these types of needs and efforts in our community. And within Lane County, it's really exciting for me to see the work that's been accomplished here so far in achieving this strategic item. In regards to the tools and technology in the data warehouse, we've established the beginnings of a modern data warehouse capable of housing useful data from across our county. So a structure that allows us to put all of our information together so that we can share and use it with the tools. We've also got a tool called Tableau that's being used by Lane County staff to prepare and provide analytics and to build dashboards that are driving that better decision making in our county. And we're starting to see some of this work reach beyond just our desktops and onto our public website. So there's been some great efforts in this area. And I have Micah Brown from Health and Human Services, their Quality and Compliance Division, to talk about some great work there. And Deanna Smith from Technology Services, she's a programmer analyst specializing in visualizations and analytics in our department, to talk a little more about the tools and technology we use and the ways we're capitalizing on our data-driven decision-making vision here at the county.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I wanted to talk about business intelligence. And business intelligence, or BI, is a broad term that encompasses the fields of data analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to organize data and transform it into information, which is then used to acquire knowledge and eventually glean insights to solve problems, improve or change processes, and measure and evaluate key performance indicators, or get the wisdom out of the data. The BI technology selected for Lane County is Tableau software. Tableau provides a user-friendly interface which enables both analysts and non-technical people to interact with the data and make discoveries through self-service BI. Tableau consists of several products. Tableau Prep, which is used to clean, organize, and aggregate the data. Tableau Desktop, in which users create the dashboards. And Tableau Server, which is an enterprise-level platform that can handle thousands of users. That's where dashboards are published and people look at them. Some of the efforts where technology services has been helping apply a Tableau technology include partnering with our performance auditor, Casey Creer, and providing some interactive components for the upcoming recruitment and retention audit completion, identifying potential data visualization opportunities for the courthouse, factoring in population growth and space needs, assessment and taxation process and resource management analytics, public works waste management, resource optimization for peak business times and overall workflow. And we're also partnering with H&HS in helping support their quality and compliance work where we can.
Thank you. So good morning. Mike asked me to come and kind of talk a little bit about what this looks like in H&HS. How are we utilizing these tools and this technology to achieve some of our goals? So at H&HS, we've been doing this for approximately 3 years, but really starting to run with Tableau a couple of years ago. And now I'm super proud of our team. We are at a very high functioning level, and it kind of blows me away every time I get a chance to see what they're doing. It's very exciting. But at H&HS, and specifically in the Quality and Compliance Division, we talk about creating a collaborative culture of quality across H&HS. And there's some key words in there that I want to kind of just unpack real briefly and as quickly as possible. The quality one, we're talking about data, but quality is the word we chose to use there because data really feeds into that quality work. You can't do one without the other. The data is kind of not as important if there's not something to do with it. And it's hard to have a quality improvement project without knowing what's actually happening. So we decided to use that term in that, and I'm going to share a couple of examples of how it's playing out. The collaborative portion, you were talking about different community partners and things. It turns out that there's a lot of barriers we encountered, especially early on, to sharing data across even coworkers, and we've had to start approaching that question, that initial conversation, differently with this collaborative approach, rather than this is my data, I'm going to hold on to it. If you see it, maybe you're going to find something I don't want you to find, or all those sorts of fears started coming in there. So we changed that conversation. We start off with we're going to figure out how we can do this together. It's really important. In fact, it's so important we can't just say no anymore. We have to figure out ways to do this. And then the culture piece, that one's something I'm also very excited about because we're trying to push this out to all of our staff. And that comes often from the top down, but we're also working from the bottom up as well. So one of the things that we just kicked off yesterday, and I don't even know if you know this yet, Karen.
That's how bottom up it is.
Right, Lisa loves it when I surprise her. I'm sure Karen does as well. But we're calling it our data heroes. So we just reached out to our clinics and we started working with some of our what we call patient care coordinators, giving them some extra training around how to use Tableau, this tool that we have, this collaborative tool. And I was blown away. This morning I looked on my Tableau on my phone, and already some of these PCCs have started creating some different visualizations themselves to try to figure out how to serve their patients better. And that's the core of all of this. Is one of our sort of immediate strategies right now is actionable data in context. these PCCs, these patient care coordinators, know their patients way better than any of our analysts do. And for me to come in and say, this is what I think the data that you should have, is kind of backwards. But giving them the tools and having them ask the questions, it's super exciting. I can't even wait to see what they're going to come up with, because I can almost guarantee it's different than anything we've ever thought about. So anyway.
And that just ties in perfectly to that vision on out to our community. For those who know me, you know I'm a staunch and unwavering advocate of open data, no barrier bit data to the community, because in that same culture, our community, there are technology groups out there that would love to have access to data that could help us in ways we haven't even imagined. So that's just a great example of internally and throughout to our community how we can expand that. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate you making this presentation about our strategic plan and our update today, and I'm hoping now that the Board of Commissioners will have a pretty vibrant discussion of this and any suggestions or improvements, and I guess I'll suggest that we maybe have some questions from the board, and I'll start off, and then I'll ask that the commissioners in the kind of this format take the amount of time that I'm about to take. So I'll just ask a couple of questions. The first is on the topic of our overall housing effort, and Steve Manella and your housing and homeless work. Just fantastic, results of all the great work you've done and the work that all of your partners have done. But I am interested in knowing more about the issue that we brought up yesterday about the Measure 102 and implementation. And I hear a lot about housing, I hear a lot about homelessness, and especially all the great work we're doing. But the focus of Measure 102 is to involve government with private investors for another class of people in the home world, and those are called the affordable housing needs. And I'm wondering, what can we do to incorporate Measure 102 and the policy of the Oregon voter in passing this constitutional amendment to say we need to do more about affordable housing, which I know has not been really the focus of the homeless component of your work. So I want to know what you think about this, whether you could incorporate that, whether we should, more directly say that we're going to try to implement this to benefit people who lack affordable housing. And I would just say that there's a lot of people in our culture that are rich, and there's a really huge number of people in our culture that are homeless and in poverty, and there's a whole lot of people in between. And I think that the policy objective of Measure 102 is to try to help. Kind of the assumption is maybe the rich they don't need help from the government, and maybe we're doing something, not enough, but we're doing something to help homeless. We're really not doing much in that affordable housing arena, and I'm wondering if we should make that a part of your function of the, of the strategic plan.
Yeah, affordable housing, housing on the whole spectrum of housing and home ownership is important because, I'll tie it back to the TAC report.
Hey, are we already doing that? Is that what you're saying? We're already doing it?
Well, we need to be doing more, and specifically Measure 102 allows local governments in the state of Oregon to do bonding for affordable housing, and what it changed was a constitutional provision that said that the government continued to have ownership of those housing projects, and so as a barrier in working with private nonprofit organizations in generating more affordable housing. And what I would say is that I think that it would be good to put on our plan for the next year to look at the issue of housing finance. It supports not only affordable housing, workforce housing, it also supports the supportive housing that we're doing, because a lot of times what we do is we have people who are in those affordable housing units who are receiving services in an affordable housing unit, people who have special needs. So I think the examples are the City of Portland, Multnomah County, Metro. They have all successfully passed measures. But I would say that I would look at housing finance, and sort of the approach that you take is you look at what all the tools are. That particular tool allows you to do bigger projects so that you can get up into the hundreds of units. But I think it's really important because the way to get community support to do affordable housing is to make sure that when we finance affordable housing, we're not leaning on any one group of people. We're not leaning on the builders. We're not leaning on the general taxpayer. We're not leaning on low-income people. And so having a mix of finance tools that shows the community between the public and private sector, how everybody is contributing towards this end, I think would be the most successful way to get the most support generated for that kind of an effort.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think I'll just out of a sense of how to conduct this work session, just say that that was about 4 minutes and 57 seconds. So, Mr. Commissioner Farr, go ahead and take whatever you need, but I'm going to try to kind of keep it at around 5 minutes per commissioner.
Okay, well, you start by throwing out a single item, and there are so many different things.
True, yeah.
It's difficult for me to not respond to your comments on measure 102.
Well, you can use your time in any way you wish, absolutely.
So I'll talk about that first, ever so quickly, is that 102 is another tool that we can use to encourage businesses and government to work together. As Mr. Manoa just outlined, we can do that. We're already doing that in a lot of other ways. And if you were listening earlier, you'd hear about the financing on the MLK project, where private health organizations have stepped up and donated to it. So they're already participating, private-public partnerships. Pacific Source, for instance, Peace Health, for instance, which is a non-profit, is a private entity. Trillium stepped forward, and as has Kaiser. So we're already doing it. 102 provides us with another tool to distribute the financing a little bit more broadly. I've just spent about a quarter of my time responding to that one question that you had. But I just wanted to go back to 4C2, collaboration with internal partners. I just wanted to point out an upcoming event that really is an example of our collaboration and communication with internal and external partners, and that is, your team is going to be integral in this. It is the steering committee for the TAC report. The steering committee is going to help develop a strategic plan that integrates into other strategic plans, into our community health improvement plan, into Lane County's strategic plan, into the City of Eugene strategic plan, and make certain that it doesn't deviate from the already established strategic plan that we do have. And it's going to be massive, the way we do this, and it's going to be one of the greatest examples, I believe, of an intergovernmental partnership in ways that we've never really had a vehicle to do it before. This is a vehicle that's going to drive us deep into the future regarding the response to our housing needs in the community, and in response to the poverty response needs in the community. The second, as I talk very, very quickly here, is something that's going to happen tomorrow. And Deanna, you talked about a partnership with Dr. Creer on one of what is our biggest project, our biggest performance audit project ever. Massive, as it turns out. That's far-reaching, deep-reaching, and far-stretching into the future. And it's going to be released tomorrow. And that is the performance audit on recruiting and retention, which requires digging into and creating a massive database of information for Dr. Creer to make his recommendations from. I've not seen them yet. I'll see them at the same time the Register Guard sees them. But I do know the work that's gone into it, and I know it would not have happened without the internal partnership that you developed under 4C3. 4C2. Thank you. 4C2. See, I'm only focusing on one item out of all this long, long list. I'd like to focus more on item 1A, which is housing, but I do that on a regular basis. So I really want to point out some of the things regarding strategic planning in general by focusing on 4C2, which is partnerships, and making sure that we leverage all of our resources by working together to a common goal. When we developed the strategic plan, Lane County did not have a strategic plan before. They did. It was called the strategic plan, but it was nothing like the working document you see here in front of us. It changes every single time you look at this sheet. Every single day, new tactics are developed. Old tactics that are completed are checked off the list, but more tactics are developed so that every single person inside of this organization, not unlike when we developed this one at Jerry's in 1985, every single person in the organization knows that what they're doing is pertinent to the mission, the value, the goals, and the strategic plan that we've already have in place. We don't have to worry about whether we're deviating because it's clearly itemized in here. And if we come up with something that doesn't look like it's listed in the strategic plan, then we tend to look at where a tactic would fall inside of the strategic plan, rather than create a new goal or a new goal area. So, well, where does that fit into the strategic plan? And that's what's happening on this for C2, is that we're doing all of this internal communication work so that I love to see Health and Human Services and IT sitting next to each other in the same room, talking the same language. That's what a strategic plan does. It is a means for the entire organization to drive our resources into the future. And I am so pleased and proud to be a part of it. I carry this around with me. Can you have little wallet size?
Not that I could read.
Thank you very much. And really, so many different things to talk about inside of the strategic plan. I'd like to talk about how we truck runoff from Short Mountain up the freeway every single day, instead of having what's happening in Goshen, which will ultimately be a part of wastewater gathering, distribution, and safe disposal of. Well, right now, we're sending trucks up and down the freeway.
Yep.
Come on. You're working on eliminating what is a serious problem, and that's the way the strategic plan works. I think I went to about 6 minutes there.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I don't have as much to ask, but I was curious on these worksheets that you do are these updated quarterly as we have meetings, or are they like ongoing things that you're doing every day at your desk that you're updating?
Yeah, Commissioner Beck, they're updated quarterly. So as we have the quarterly meetings, we talk about some of the very specifics, and then they follow up with email back to me. So updated every quarter.
Okay. And I'm glad we brought up Measure 102 specifically, because we did have a little banter about this in our meeting yesterday as well, about what we should do if we were to pursue anything with Measure 102, and that was which group amongst us, our committees or boards, would be the most appropriate to maybe gather the right information, ask the right questions, and propose something to the board. Initially, I was thinking our housing board, but from my perspective, I really want to encourage our rural communities to be a part of that conversation, and that board seemed to be very metro-centric. So I wanted to bring it up here because it sounded like we have got the right people at the table today to ask, should we have maybe a separate committee, or is that still an appropriate committee or board that we could throw this question at and maybe add some more strategic folks in to talk about that and what those possibilities could be?
I guess I'm going to chime in, and I'm sure there are several people. When Steve was talking about that as part of 1A2, I think that it also is very much part of 1A1, which is the strategic priority around affordable housing. So I know, Steve, you have been thinking about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned this yesterday at the board meeting, but 1A2 is convene, sponsor, and implement a collaborative multi-jurisdictional affordable housing action plan. I think what we've recognized, what the board has recognized, and at the staff level we've recognized is affordable housing really, when to address the issue effectively, it needs to be done in a regional, a multi-jurisdictional basis, as opposed to what sort of has happened to date, which is each individual jurisdiction developing its own plans. So we've had a number of meetings. We've tried to bring together in the metro area, particularly Eugene and Springfield, to understand what they're doing or planning to do around affordable housing and how we can incorporate their plans into the work we want to do. It does sort of feel like not that we're headed in different directions, but we're sort of on different tracks. For example, the city of Eugene recently completed a lot of analysis and work around its affordable housing action plan and recommendations. I believe that they worked with Better Housing Together, and they hired a consultant to make recommendations that led to the recommendation to impose a construction excise tax for the city. So what we have more recently discussed is engaging with a local consultant, and we've talked to Better Housing Together and the architect that they have, Karin Knudsen, if you know Karin, who's done some really fantastic work. And that's what Better Housing Together is. It's a nonprofit organization that is largely businesses and other nonprofits. It's not government led, and their effort has really been focused on identifying the missing middle, investing in the missing middle housing. So that's sorry, long answer to the question, but I wonder if it would be, we've identified this as an initiative, the board has identified this as an initiative, and I wonder if a good place to start would be for us to identify a consultant that can lead some of that analysis and incorporate looking at Measure 102 and the extent to which Lane County, it would be an effective use of resources to pursue that, and maybe how we could expand it and do it more on a regional basis. But that may be, certainly if the board wants to identify an item for us to focus specifically on Measure 102, we can. We've sort of looked at this and said, we have a lot of ground to cover around affordable housing, so it may make sense to bring someone on and do that more broad and thorough analysis and makes a series of recommendations to the board.
Thank you. Yeah, I have known Karin and their work at Better Housing Together. They've been very Eugene focused, but their research is all there. Like the base and foundation of the research is all there already. And if we can broaden that conversation with them up, or whomever we choose as a consultant to a countywide level, I think that 102 and other housing issues and solutions would really work.
Okay, Commissioner Burney.
It's wonderful to meet some of you guys, and a lot of times when I'm trying to assess organizations and capacity, I ask questions that could be misinterpreted as critical, and that I just want you to know that's not where I'm coming from at all. Hey, and Steve, as it relates to that response, I would be interested in a concise scope of what that consulting might look like so we could input it. And I'd also like to suggest that that notion could also be used to discuss the role of housing in economic development. One of the things that I've been doing is I've been listening to each report, if you would, or information, and I've been trying to associate it to the quote-unquote strategic plan. And here's the conclusion I've come to, and you can correct me. The strategic plan, i.e. plan, is simply a way to get everyone on the same page for reporting purposes. That's my sense, and for coordination to understand how the left hand, am I incorrect in that? Because I don't see it as much more than that, and maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, well, I mean, our primary intent with this, when we really began this effort around 2014, was to say we have fewer resources than we need to provide the level of service in a number of areas, fewer staff.
Universal
not a lot of
reality,
time.
yes.
Yeah, and so if we're gonna if we're gonna be effective at anything, we can't spread ourselves and try to be everything to all people.
Right.
We need to really focus on what the board gets to decide, what are the things that are most important, what are your priorities, and then we all align around that. And so as new things come up, we don't get distracted by shiny objects or fires that burn, we're focused on.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I'm going to, because I'm going to try and maintain this short. So how is it that to maximize efficiency in an environment of scarce resources, we talk about Lane County being the best place to live, work, and play? I'm trying to make connections here, for me, conceptually to understand.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, it's either, I don't understand the goals. So, and we can do that later, because I'm just trying to understand. The other question is, everyone talks about data. Do people track time allocated just to strategic plan in development internally in the county? Is this something that is just baked into everybody's jobs, or is this something that one can actually quantify the time and cost spent constructing and coordinating? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that we track, I don't believe that we track people's time based on that. Yeah. I think we viewed it as, while it is an investment of time, it creates efficiencies in terms of making sure that we're accountable, we're successful and accountable in the areas that the board has decided you want to be successful and accountable in.
And that's all. I'm not being critical. You will hear me by continuing remediation, but thank you on that. Then I have some specific comments. One is that data-driven decision-making as a vision, or data-driven decision-making as an objective towards making good decisions?
There's a vision statement behind that vision. It's just that we formed a vision, and then the tactics with governance and tools are all in achieving that vision. I can quote the vision for you. A little lengthy, but.
Oh, no, that's good. I appreciate this very much. And I also, as it relates to data-driven stuff, to the degree this is even appropriate, want to encourage people to look at a book that I'm reading now, and it's phenomenal. And it's called Artificial Intelligence Superpowers.
Yeah.
You know the one I'm going to...
Yeah. Well, I know of many such articles. AI.
No, this is a book. This is a book, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order, and it's written by a Chinese-American, Taiwanese-American, who was the head of Google China, and who's talking about, over the next 15 years, AI and technology displacing about a third of all the jobs that we're familiar with. And then it's fascinating. And then it also saying, what's the one thing that AI does not contain? And that is love and compassion for others. And he even discusses the transition of resources. And I think it's something that's very much in the strategic, forward-looking knowledge of just all of us as we plan forward. So I just wanted to point that out in my few minutes. And this is fascinating. And I'm honored to be a part of the process. And it's also, I've known Mr. Manella for a few years. And Steve, I'm constantly impressed with your work. I want to say my last parting comment is, it kind of seems like within this organization and the departments, we're doing really, really, really good work, and it's powered by really good intentions. And yet it also seems to me like some of the areas, the situation is actually getting worse, not better, in the overall community. So while we may be developing tons of housing and approaching all this stuff, the homeless situation is not getting better. And for me, I'm also trying to connect, and I have no answers here, but how we connect our work with good programs, with actually creating civic change for all of those who consider Lane County home. But thank you, this is really fascinating.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. So I just want to state my support for wrapping Measure 102 into the toolbox under both 1A1 and 1A2. You know, somehow or another getting that to be looked at and see where that fits in as something the county can utilize. The one thing that seems to be missing a little bit, though, in the housing conversation under that strategic initiative is the overall concept of increasing supply. Because one of the reasons why we have a housing shortage is the cost of housing, which is driven by our lack of supply. And that's not really addressed so much. We're addressing specific things, addressing the, supportive housings, because of the homeless situation and the needs for that to help cure the homeless problems. And we're addressing some affordable housing issues, but the overall total supply of housing, because that's really an issue for workforce. And then when we get into economic development, unfortunately, they scheduled the meeting at the same time as a board meeting, but there was a meeting down in Florence to specifically talk about workforce housing in the coastal economy and how badly they're being hurt by the fact that there is no moderately priced housing, in the coastal communities, yet all of that is now service economy and not high income wages. It's just so that's not about supportive housing. It's not about what we're going to build with Measure 102 necessarily. Could be, possibly, but it's not quite there. Really, it's about housing supply in general and just getting more of it on the market. And so I would love to see maybe a 1A3 that has something to do with efforts to improve buildable lands, maybe whether we're providing technical assistance to some of our smaller communities. What are we, how are we partnering and tracking maybe some of the work that the City of Eugene's doing on their long-term, buildable land supply and some of the work they're doing around that. And just in general, what are we doing, this kind of wraps into some work Alex is doing in Salem around, ADUs in rural residential, all those efforts that we're trying, where are we capturing those efforts just to purely add to the inventory of housing? I don't care whether it's for rich people or for the homeless. I want more housing, period, because that's what's going to drive the cost of housing down. It's our restricted supply that's driving it up beyond the means of people. So if I can make a pitch for that in the future. A couple other quick comments. 1C1 needs to be updated. The 10-year public safety plan is no longer called that, I think, and because we just readopted it recently. Came out of PSCC. So we need to kind of look at that particular strategy and make sure we're syncing up with that. And then also 3B2, we completed the Parks Master Plan. So I'd like to see that be changed and morphed into some kind of goal around developing a financing strategy for the master plan. And that's the next step in that logical step. So as we're looking at this strategic plan update, those are a couple places where I think we need to make some corrections to the strategic plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So let me suggest that if we're going to stay on our schedule, we have about 15 minutes left. So would we like to have like a lightning round, or you want to have just 5 minutes each? And we, by the way, kept well within 1 or 2 minutes of each other in the first round. So thank you for all commissioners to observe that. Hearing nothing further on that topic, I'll just kind of march into another round here. I'm going to ask some data questions here. So I've got Ms. Smith and our technology people here, and I just want to ask a question. We have these big picture things like, build a county where living, working, and playing is good, and we had an introduction of the idea of maybe quality, like quality living, quality playing, quality working. I'm just curious, in the formulation of the strategic plan, and I guess I'm looking forward to this point where we have data experts like yourself, where you're gathering data that will help us achieve that. And I'm thinking about, well, what data do you currently gather about working, living, playing, and other components of our strategic plan? Do you gather data like that? And is there a way for us with this new technology and the way of interpreting data, is there a way of actually helping us make these decisions? So first we need the data on the living, working, and playing, or any other quality, high, medium, low, the words that we're using a lot. So, I mean, I guess I'm thinking about things like the effort the state made a few years ago to quantify important things in our society, such as the number of days you can see Mount Hood. No, more days, that's good. Fewer days, that's bad. Higher unemployment, bad. Higher employment, good. Higher wages, good. So what data are you gathering that will be helpful to make these decisions? And maybe put decision makers out of business, because the data will then drive, with the newer tools, the data will drive the solution.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
So the Tableau software, it's a tool, but one of the things it's really very good at is combining data from multiple sources. And within the context of H&HS, that's certainly a lot of our work. Deanna has been doing some great work with some of our census data and getting more and more of that sort of broader picture data in. One of our goals really in this, utilizing this tool and the data warehouse, is to start asking some of those bigger questions. So as far as it goes, as far as what kinds of data outside of the H&HS world, I'm not as aware, but I can tell you that the infrastructure has been built in a way that we can rapidly integrate these
Well,
different
let me ask you a specific question. I think it's bad when we have more kids having asthma attacks in Lane County. You know, when we have more, that's bad. When we have fewer, that's good. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if the data supports that, but it's my opinion.
We can
So
actually answer that
do you
question,
track that? So outside of our entrepreneurial effort, right, our spending money the federal government gives us to help poor people or help all people with health care needs, are we tracking the big picture of data, number of, do we know that? You know?
Yeah, for population level data, we actually do have that information.
Okay.
And we are actually working on integrating that into more tactical, specific work plans,
Okay.
as well as sort of just helping the community address.
And what about in the employment arena? We know that if people have jobs and they're being paid good wages, are we tracking that as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that was outside of the scope of HHS.
No. And so what I'm saying is, in the goal of trying to get this transparency of this data, is there some place in, maybe this is for you guys, is there a place in the strategic plan where we talk about the data that is driving the decisions?
Yeah. So a couple comments. First, you.
I'm getting close to my 5 minutes.
That's good, yeah.
This was the lightning round.
We only
No, this may be, yeah, we have
There have
11
been a couple
minutes.
comments about our vision to be the best county in which to live, work, and play. And what is that, how, and I think Commissioner Burney asked, well, what's the connection between all this work and that? I just want to sort of set the context for what these things mean. A vision is intended to be bold, hairy, and audacious, something that is out there that you're always striving for, you may never achieve, but you're always working towards. So it's this point in time in the future and this sort of long-term outcome. So the idea of our vision is we want to be the best, right? We want to be the best at everything that we do. That's what's driving us. There are a lot of things that we want to be the best community. We want to be recognized as the best community in which to live, work, and play. All the things that we're investing in are the things that we believe we can control, that are within our control to affect that ultimate vision. And then our mission is focused more on who we are and what we do every single day, managing limited resources to deliver vital services to the community. Our behaviors are who we are, how we act. Our behaviors and values are who we are and how we act. And our purpose is a broad statement about how everyone in the organization is connected towards the same thing. So that's sort of what those things are. And if you look at, as it relates to the data on this one pager, you see these are all the measures that we've identified through the strategic plan that connect to, so these are mostly community measurements that we are tracking on an annual basis to determine whether or not these things, for example, the proportion of cost burden low-income households, the availability of supported housing units, have those units increased over time, and that's something that we can control and we can measure specifically.
What do you do?
The number of Tier 2 and Tier 3 primary care patient-centered medical homes, public safety response time. So these are all things that we're tracking on an annual basis, and over time we can say, are the investments, the priorities, initiatives, and actions that we're investing in as an organization, as a leadership, as a staff, are those actually impacting these community outcomes?
Excellent. Well, thank you. And I'm going to say my time's expired. Okay, Commissioner Farr, go ahead.
Thank you. This is not a lightning round, this is a slow-moving rolling stone.
Thank you, sir.
Just very, very briefly, we have so many tactics in here that are included in there that every single one of them is worthy of talking about. I'm going to talk about any of them. I'm just going to talk about the strategic plan in general once again, and the value of a strategic plan. Not being simply a mechanism for reporting and gathering data that's happening, is a mechanism for people to know what to report on, and whether the work that we're doing on a regular basis is integral to the work that we're doing as an organization. And what did you say, bold and hairy?
And audacious, bold, hairy, and audacious.
Yeah. And it is, it's bold, hairy, and audacious, and that's the nature of it. But if you dig, sometimes if we read the supporting documentation, we'll have answers to our questions. Like, are we measuring? How do we have ability to measure? Well, yes, it's listed right here, the things that we're measuring. And we're measuring all of these things. That's how you know your strategic plan is working, is by making progress toward the things that you've identified in your strategic plans as key initiatives, supported by tactics. Tactics are what we do today. Initiatives are what we do this year, this century. So it's, the term living, breathing document is vastly overused for documents. This is a living, breathing document. When I say breathing, I mean it inhales, it assimilates what it's breathed in, and it exhales. And it does it on a daily basis. What is really, truly magical about this to me is I can walk throughout this county to whatever department I'm in, and I see this plan at work. And I can relate what I'm seeing, the work that I'm seeing happening, to something that is specifically in the plan documented, usually as deep down as the tactics that not all are listed here by stretch of the imagination. And so it's once again, it is a means for me as a front-end person. And Micah, you talked about being bottom-up, and Karen, you said that's an example of bottom-up. Well, that's what it's about. The people doing the work are the ones who know how to do the work. The people doing the work are the ones who know what they need to do their work better, facilitating people who are actually digging the hole, helping them dig the hole more efficiently, better, and more satisfying to them, makes it as a better organization. And that's what this is all about, is making certain that we can facilitate the work of the people who are doing the work, which sometimes is us, and sometimes it's people we've never even met, but we're all under the same document.
Thank you.
My questions were answered, so I pass.
Okay.
Does that mean I get like twice the time? So the strategic plan, if I have this correct, is a living, breathing, bold, hairy, audacious, or whatever document. On that level, I get it. If you don't know where you're going, anyone can lead you there. And if you don't know where you're going, anyone can measure anything, and you're going to get confused. In my perfect world, I would have a strategic plan that had the goals of everyone in the county that wants to work, has a job with a living wage and benefits. I would break it down into those kinds of things, but it really doesn't matter. So I don't have anything else other than, and I'm going to ask one question, but I know that Sarah and I are going to get together and stuff like this later. But Sarah, when you talked about forgive my parochial thing, but when you talked about Glenwood, and then you said we have a role, and that you mentioned CETA, So I'm about to go to my first ever CETA meeting,
Yes, you are.
which I know what 3 of the 4 letters stand for. Springfield Economic Development.
Agency.
Thank you. And I want to make sure that I'm informed and I represent the county's interests as well as my own community's interests. So would it be helpful to have a briefing before that meeting so that I can do that? Or as I think we emailed, did you say it was really nothing? Because I don't know our specific value add with respect to that
I think-
particular initiative.
I think it could potentially be helpful for you and I to chat prior to you going to that meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely. I can provide you with a little bit of additional information around conversations we've had in the county's role. We are not leading in that role. We are certainly an assist in that role, but we do have a role to play. It's regionally significant infrastructure, certainly employment lands.
It's Monday night. Just
Let's
letting
get
you
it on the
know.
calendar.
Okay, and for the just as a quick one, a friend of mine, I'm going to share with him the Richardson thing, just as a, because these are things I'm trying to learn. A friend of mine owns a pretty significant business in Springfield, and half of their land is not annexed to the city of Springfield, it's county property. He's planning an expansion and hiring about 125 more people. It's a fascinating place, and it's got a wonderful niche in their particular market. So I'm just letting you know, Sarah's been putting up with me, saying, well, what about this, what about this, what about that? Because sometimes you don't, right? I mean, it's an interesting kind of a thing. My understanding is that Springfield is going to look at annexing it prior to this expansion.
Correct.
And the interesting thing is, I also know that if it doesn't occur in a certain period of time, that expansion will not occur in Springfield. So these are some of the dynamics I'm playing with as I'm trying to be of value to everybody here. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, and Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'll just really quickly just state my support of our strategic plan. Without a strategic plan, you don't know where you're going.
Right.
You're defining your destination. And then in your tactics, you're talking about what route you're going to take to get there, possibly, and what vehicle you're going to drive or whatever else. But if you don't have that roadmap, you'll never get to where you want to go. And in developing our strategic plan, it was so important that we involve the community, so that the destinations we've identified we're going to are ones the community wants to go to. That's where that community involvement piece of that was so important. So now we've identified destinations that the community wants to go to. At the same time, we're the leaders of a 1,400 employee organization. Our employees have to be engaged in their work and have to understand how they fit into the whole. This is the document that does that for them. So it is such an important document for the entire county, our organization as an organization, and our employees, that it ties all that together. Our community's values and goals, our employees understanding, how they fit into that so they can be engaged and productive and happy in their work. There's so many things, and that's why that vision has to be, bold, hairy, and audacious, because that's the way out there where we want to, everybody would really love us to be. Our purpose to improve lives ties everybody together. Whether you're that snowplow driver that hiked over a mile to check on somebody, or you're somebody in that federally qualified health clinic helping somebody, deal with a chronic health issue. They're improving lives. Everybody can tie to that. So I just, it's a really important document. I take our updates and our manipulating this plan very seriously. It also ties together 100 other strategic plans, whether it's our community health improvement plan or whatever. It's all tied into this and feeds up to it. So I really appreciate the work we do. Yes, we probably do spend some time and money tracking it and developing it and modifying and keeping it updated. but it's what makes the organization work. And it really ties back to doing the work that our community wants us to do. So thank you for that work. And it's the one place I truly appreciate Steve's leadership, because he took us way far down that road of being led by a strategic plan once we hired Steve. So
That's the one place?
yeah, it's just, if there's one thing, if there's one thing that stands out about Steve is where he's taken us in strategic planning, and I don't think there's anyone in this organization that would argue about that. So, bravo on the work with this. I really appreciate the work we do.
All right, well, thank you, and this was an excellent work session. I really appreciate everybody's participation. Do you want to add something else?
Just a wrap-up comment, if
Okay,
that's all right.
sure.
I haven't shared this with the board, but I've been thinking that it would be, this summer may be a really great time for us to do, we did a retreat with the board and our exec team back in 18, when was it? When we were January of 18, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so a little over a year ago, in the development of this. And there's a lot of value in doing it. I've just been thinking, we have 2 new commissioners and a lot of new activities here. And so I'd like you to just think about that, and we can talk about it at a later date, but whether or not you feel like there would be some value in doing a retreat, a half-day retreat with the board and our exec team, and we could have someone facilitate that conversation. Could be incorporate some aspects of our strategic plan, but also talk about roles and responsibilities and just kind of all of those things. I think there may be some value in that. And then I want to I know we're out of time here, Mr. Chair, and this may not be the right time. Maybe the retreat is a better time for it. But say to the board, this document and all of this work is really only valuable if it has the full support of the Board of Commissioners. So I can champion it, and our exec team can champion all day long, and it will have some level of value, but we will maximize the impact of this work and I think that's where we've had a lot of success and progress, is knowing that the entire organization is committed to this. So certainly there's work to be done, and there's revisions that can be made, and I want to make sure that all 5 commissioners' voices and passions and priorities are reflected in this. So you had an update here and a discussion, and I think it'd be great if we carved out some more time this summer after we get through the budget process to have even more discussion, make sure that the board feels like this is something that all of you champion individually and as a group.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I think we should all make a comment. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that I'm going to repeat what I started with. I absolutely, especially after Jay's last comment, I want you to know I thoroughly support this. And I said my questions will sound like I don't. In my experience, when there's a new product or project or business opportunity, what we want everyone to do is challenge it. Challenge every assumption, poke holes in it, find out what's wrong with it. And for me, this is a process. I assure you, Steve, and everyone, that I will do exactly what you want to do as a commissioner, and I support it. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics of how we got to where we are. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate all of your great work. Oh, did you want to make a comment?
No, just one last thing. Let's have the retreat at Driftwood Shores.
Very good.
I know a place in Kona.
Let's not say we did.
So I guess we're ready to, you guys want to take a break? Want to take a break now, or? All right, let's have a 5-minute recess. Well, we are back for our second major portion of our meeting, and that is on our Tuesday, March 19 board meeting. I'd like to ask our friends at Lane Council of Governments, if you are hearing us, we want to make sure that you are recording our meeting. And if there's any problems, please get a hold of Ms. Jones right away. So we're going into item number 3 on our Wednesday, March 20, 2019 meeting, and that is our work session, the update on the Oregon Health Authority's procurement process for coordinated care organizations. And with us to discuss this is Karen Gaffney, the Director of the Lane County Department of Health and Human Services. She has a great group of people with her today, so please introduce your colleagues and make your presentation.
Mr. Chair, if I may, prior
Sure.
to the
Sure.
introductions, I would like to declare a potential conflict of interest. My wife works for Trillium, which is our CCO provider. She went to work for Trillium prior to my becoming a Glenwood County Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, in the interest of time, I'm going to run through the slides really quickly, and then everyone will participate in the conversation. So before we start, I'll let everyone introduce themselves. I'll do the slides, then the bulk of the time will be for conversation.
Jocelyn Warren, Public Health Manager.
Pat Ledke, Chief Medical Officer.
Ron Gell, the Community Health Center Manager.
Lisa Roth, Trillium Behavioral Health Manager.
And I appreciate these members of our team being here for the work session today. In truth, probably everyone from our leadership team could have been here and been helpful in the conversation, because the coordinated care organization really impacts strategically and practically almost all of the work that happens in health and human services. So this is a critical issue for us, and I appreciate the board taking time today to talk a little bit about the future of CCOs and the state procurement. Today is an update from the work session that we did on February 5th, where we introduced in general, kind of gave some history about CCOs and introduced the Oregon Health Authority's procurement process to you. I'm going to revisit some of those things just to do a level setting, particularly if there are people who are watching the meeting in the audience who would have that background information, and then really get to the question for today in terms of any potential direction that the board might want to give us on at least a couple of key questions that I have, and anything else that you might have thought about since our last conversation. So by way of a reminder, the coordinated care organizations, we refer to them as CCOs in Oregon, were first stood up in 2012. They create a single budget for physical health, mental health, and oral health as a way to engage communities in collaborating around whole health systems. By definition, the legislature established them to be grounded in local communities, so there's local governance and stakeholders, very clear metrics to measure progress, not just financial progress, but really much more important, clinical and health progress towards achieving the triple aim, which is what's in the middle of that circle there: better health, better care, and lower costs. And the challenge for communities and the state, and quite frankly the nation, is to be able to achieve all three of those things at the same time, has been the challenge for our healthcare systems. And CCOs are structured to focus on primary care, prevention, and chronic conditions as really the only way to be able to get those health improvements and cost containment strategies. As I said, the legislature enacted House Bill 3650 and then Senate Bill 1580 to stand up these organizations. It's part of our waiver with the federal government for Medicaid. In August of 2012, our local CCO, along with 15 other CCOs at the time across Oregon, started business, and we have had Trillium in Lane County since the beginning of the CCO process, and this is the first time that the state has opened up those contracts for reprocurement. So that's the process that we're in right now, with new contracts scheduled to go into effect January of 2020. So that's the timeline. Again, the framework for CCOs they're designed to truly be transformative about our healthcare delivery systems in Oregon, and bring together local communities and our knowledge and data in order to solve problems, recognizing that the healthcare delivery system and challenges in Multnomah County is going to be different than Lane County, going to be different than Umatilla, and local communities should be part of designing those solutions. And the state gives flexibility in a lot of the how CCOs get to those results, but there is a shared accountability for results, and that includes a financial shared accountability in terms of quality incentive metrics for all of those communities. In Lane County, and I want to take a little bit of time on this slide, this is the same slide that we had in February, and as this process has continued to move forward, when I've talked with entities in the community who are interested in applying for being a CCO in Lane County, I've talked about this really as the framework that we talked about with the board for what the relationship between CCOs and Lane County would look like. So the first is to have a very meaningful role in governance of those CCOs. As I told you back in February, there's a variety of legal structures. Some are not-for-profits, some are for-profits. All CCOs have to have a local governing board, and it has to include certain minimal stakeholders, and then each CCO can add others as it sees fit. So what we have talked about is making sure that Lane County government, as the safety net, as the representative of everyone who lives in this community, as the ultimate accountability for much of the health, public safety, and other social determinants in our community, that we want to have a meaningful role in the governance of the CCO. The second piece was around behavioral health in particular, and as a state, for a whole host of very good reasons, behavioral health has been lifted up as a particular key piece for CCOs from the beginning, and even more importantly in the next round of CCOs that they refer to as CCO 2.0. We know that high-end behavioral health issues impact housing, and homelessness, part of housing, impact public safety, are significant cost drivers, impact physical health. So that behavioral health piece is really critically important. And Lane County is responsible for all of the non-Medicaid part of that system. So that's the crisis system, mental health crisis, regardless of your insurance coverage. That is state hospital access, all those high-end pieces. So when the CCO in Lane County was first constructed, what Lane County negotiated was a shared responsibility around coordinating those behavioral health benefits. So that's mental health and that's substance abuse treatment. The arrangement we have in our current CCO is that Lane County staff are actually under contract with the CCO to do that work. And in that way, we're able to closely collaborate on making sure that the larger system stays intact and we don't have duplication, inefficiency, gaps, all of those pieces. And I'll remind the board that in one of your hats, you are the local mental health authority as well. So again, responsible for that whole system regardless of payer. The third thing we talked about as a framework for our relationship is very clear collaboration around primary prevention, social determinants, and public health related issues. And again, this can take a host of different forms. In our CCO in Lane County, what we negotiated from the beginning was a per member per month set aside. In an insurance world, that's making sure that we account for whatever changes happen in how many people are on Medicaid. So we don't set a set dollar amount, but really for every person, every month, we set aside $1.33 that goes toward primary prevention. It's an odd number, but we settled on that number from research that Dr. Lutke did by calling the CDC and calling SAMHSA to say how much should an insurance company set aside for that primary prevention, and that's what the answer was. So we've been setting aside $1.33 specifically for those upstream prevention programs. So those are the good behavior game in kindergarten classrooms, that is obesity prevention work with kids. Pat and Jocelyn can go down the list, but it's not what you usually think of insurance companies as paying for, but it's that primary prevention. And then the final fourth element was collaboration at the clinical level. You know, in our federally qualified health centers, both on the behavioral health and the primary care side, we provide a huge safety net clinic for people who have Medicaid or people who have no insurance in particular. So as one of the largest providers of that clinical service, we would expect that any CCO would collaborate with us. So I'm going to come back to that, which is why I took a little bit of time on that particular slide. Also just wanted, for those of you who are newer to the board, lift up a couple specific examples of benefits, again, of why the CCO relationship is so important to us in community. The first is what I was talking about with the $1.33. That collaboration with the CCO allowed public health to invest in evidence-based strategies in our community, and also to invest in some key staff resources for the whole community. Prior to the CCO, we didn't have an epidemiologist in public health, and we were able to fund that position under contract with our CCO. We also have a whole menu of evidence-based prevention strategies that our prevention scientists sign off on before those are implemented. It's been about $1.5 million a year of primary prevention that goes in at $1.33 per member per month. Second piece, in fact, I think we might have mentioned this just earlier today or yesterday for sure, two separate $1 million investments from the CCO to create two new clinics in the community health centers. Our Delta Oaks Clinic and our Brookside Clinic were both created with grants from Trillium and provided tremendous access to care for people in our community. The third that members may remember, we were talking about the MLK Commons just earlier today as part of the board's strategic focus around homelessness. And our CCO has pledged capital money toward that particular project, $500,000 toward that project, and also has allowed us to double the Fuse project in the community by funding that. And then the fourth example would be coordination on behavioral health. And this happens a lot in Lisa Roth's team, where we look at needs for those most high-end people in our community. We talk about people being boarded at the emergency department. How do we get our state hospital numbers down? And there have been significant investments on the Trillium side to help with that. This is just informational for you, just to get a sense of where we are in the process. Applications are due April 22nd, and then we should know by July who they are intending to contract with. One of the interesting things, so this is our current footprint. Of importance to the board in 2011 and 2012 was that there be a single region, that Lane County get its own CCO. And that was a piece that we focused on, and in fact we were able to do that. We had alignment with one CCO, and this is a very simplified version of the structure of our CCO, but just for illustrative purposes, they have a governing board, the Community Advisory Council is required, we have a clinical advisory panel, which most CCOs also have, and then a series of standing committees as well. Lane County has staff who participate in all of those boxes, at all of those levels, in some of them actually more than one person, but our investment is huge in the success of our CCO, and there are about 90,000 Lane County residents who currently have the Oregon Health Plan. So that's how we manage that today. You may recall at the work session in February, I said that there were 4 organizations who had submitted letters of intent to apply for Oregon. So this is what that would look like if all 4 of those are awarded contracts. Again, we still just have those 90,000 people who get care through the Oregon Health Plan, but we could have up to 4 different CCOs that are all slightly different with their own governing structures and boards. Again, critically important to the county's work and the work in Health and Human Services. So the administrative burden alone, just to try and participate in that, is huge. And then thinking about the goals of actually coordinating and bringing people together, it's challenging to imagine how that structure would further those goals in our community. So, here's where I bring my presentation to a close and start to hand it back over to you for questions and comments. The RFA process that the Health Authority is running is not necessarily structured to pick a single contractor in communities. So oftentimes when the county will run an RFP, there's a scoring matrix, and so you can see who scores highest, and unless there's some reason to override that, that's who gets the contract. The RFA process is really mostly a series of pass-fail questions and a determination whether an entity meets minimum requirements or not. And then the health authority has discretion to develop contracts with any or all of those who meet the minimum qualifications. So that's why I put up the slide with the 4 competing CCOs, all of various sizes, I'm sure. But that's a concern that as a department and as staff we certainly have, and would encourage you to consider weighing in with the state about whether you think there's a concern if we were to have more than one CCO in Lane County. I will tell you that the mental health directors in October provided that input to Pat Allen at the OHA. I don't know if AOC has talked about it yet in Human Services Commission, Committee, but that's another place to maybe think about how to weigh in with the state. Again, we don't get to make the decision, it's a state decision.
They have, and I actually recused from that.
Okay. So that's one piece of this, and then the other, actually I guess the top bullet there is to let you know that we have been contacted by each of the 4 potential applicants in our community. Their letters of intent are non-binding, so they may not all end up applying, but they all are actively working on an application. I can tell you at least that much. And I would like to get your feedback about whether, in terms of those 4 criteria that I laid out, in getting a successful memorandum of understanding with us, if that criteria holds for you as guidance for the department in terms of saying, yes, the county will support your application and work with you, or no, we won't. So those are kind of the 2 questions that I pose to you, and we can take them in whatever order makes sense, and we're all happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to participate much in the question asked,
Okay.
listening to the answers, but I do have one clarifying question, if I may.
So why don't we start? Go ahead.
It's just regarding the $1.33. Who writes that check and who spends it?
That is a great question. So I'll maybe start on that one. The check is written by Trillium. To whom that check is written needs to be mutually agreed upon by Trillium and ultimately the board of Trillium and Lane County Public Health. So Jocelyn's staff provides staff support to their subcommittee that looks at evidence-based practices in the CHIP. It is a shared community health improvement plan. But ultimately, whatever is funded is mutually agreed upon by the county and by Trillium.
And the things that are funded are, for instance, an epidemiologist.
Yes. Would Pat or Jocelyn like to talk about any other quick examples of things that are funded?
Sure, like the primary prevention programs, and a lot of them are school-based, they grew out of the first community health improvement plan, and you might remember because that was the one that included tobacco as a feature specifically, and I think that's the one that the county's really worked really hard on. The other ones were obesity prevention, mental health as well, so the primary prevention programs are implemented in middle schools throughout mostly rural areas of Lane County that had high numbers of Trillium clients. So that was kind of one of the features of choosing those schools. It's been expanded over the last several years. They've been really successful, but they have a number of outcomes related to reduced substance use, high school graduation rates improve, long-term outcomes. So that piece is really cool. It also funds the Q-tip program, which is their quitting tobacco and pregnancy program. So that's another really important piece that was tied to tobacco as well in the first chip. Some of the other things have been different sort of pilot programs that have kind of not been sustained over time. So there is an evaluation piece of it, so that we look at what's working and what's not working. And if it's not working, then we try something different. And an example is Q-tip, because at first it was being piloted in providers' offices and OBGYN offices with pregnant women, and it wasn't working at all. There was a real difficulty in getting providers to kind of get enthusiastic about the program and refer. So they moved it to WIC. So now it's located in WIC, and it has a really great robust referral system. So we serve almost 40% of pregnant women in Lane County through WIC. So that's a great opportunity for them catching people who are really, really motivated too, because they're pregnant, to quit smoking. So that's been a really great service. The other positions that are funded are the school-based health program coordinator. So that's open now because there's been some moving around of those positions, but there's two. So there's a coordinator and then basically an assistant who's helping with the evaluation and assessment pieces in the schools. And then there's our epidemiologist, and also the person who assists Trillium with convening their CAC, the Community Advisory Council, and the RAC, which is the Rural Advisory Council. And then the fifth position is, who am I forgetting?
It's okay. For their purposes, we're good.
I could go on and on.
That answers my question very well, and thank you for the latitude allowing me to ask that question. I ask this type of question fairly regularly when I consider my potential conflict of interest, because it's important to me to understand that Trillium is writing the check, and we are spending it basically on our programs. So there's a kind of a reverse flow of resources, which is important, that we understand that the money is coming in this direction, in that particular, in that arena. So, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. I have just a couple of questions, which is, you had asked whether we as commissioners as a board, want to weigh in on multiple, applicants, or supporting multiple applicants, or talking about maybe suggesting we narrow it down. Is it impactful in any way if the board writes a letter in support of any particular applicant?
I don't know the answer to that in terms of how it would be scored in terms of the health authorities process. What I do know is we don't have a criteria that we've published to say which one would we select to write, as who would we think is best. So if we were to support only one applicant, we would need to develop some sort of criteria to be able to pick who that would be, and we haven't done that at this point.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Your criteria holds for me.
Okay.
Whatever you suggest would be the most effective way to weigh in with the state. I heard you say AOC, but I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, in terms of relationships we might have, et cetera. My understanding is not to weigh in on any particular one of the four applicants, but to weigh in on, don't create a cluster for us.
Something like that, yes. Yes, I think that, again, as I just said in response to Commissioner Buck's question, I don't know that we have published a process to pick who. So in
Right.
some ways, just saying, we don't care who you pick, but just pick only one, because if we have multiple, it's really hard.
And that relates to my only comment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that we don't want to choose one. It seems to me we want to be positioned, correct? So that no matter who or what mix of providers receive these contracts, Lane County essentially has the same position and the same role to play.
That has been our strategy up to this point, yes, is that I've taken a leave of absence from the Trillium Board so that I don't have a conflict there, and I'm working with each of the 4 applicants based on the criteria that we talked about.
So there you go, total support, I get it, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bozievich.
Yeah. First, I'll say I do support you continuing to work with each of the 4 applicants equally. It should be a fair and open process of however we, provide information so they can prepare their applications. But I do strongly support the idea that we should have a single CCO in this county. Splitting it up, however they're going to try and do it, or awarding, splitting the award will be a nightmare. I mean, I just, it won't, it will not benefit the public's health. It won't work towards those 3 goals, in the same way. In fact, it'll actually work against that. So any way that the board can help weigh in on that, either through AOC or directly to OHA, I'm supportive of. So I don't know if we need a motion at the end of this or not to do so. My other question might be is, can we, is Bobby Green the person we worked through maybe to get that message across? Former Lane County Commissioner, now is the governmental relations person for OHA.
Former Eugene City Council.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my current go-to person when I really don't know what to do.
Yeah. So that might be, where we can strongly put that message, because, for me, if they all, survive the pass-fail portion that says that they can do the work, I don't really want to try and steer which one or who. That's not my business, that's OHA that should really, I kind of question OHA's system if they don't have something that leads to a ranking. That they don't have some kind of criteria that leads to a ranking of the best organization to provide that service to our most vulnerable population. Yeah, just seems a little bit backwards, that it's just, oh, you're pass-fail, you're okay to provide service. What are those ads that are out now? Okay is not okay, or whatever, just okay, just okay is not okay. Yeah. Yeah, when you go in for breaks, just okay, whatever it is. Yeah, so, just okay is not okay. Maybe that's, so maybe that might be a secondary message to OHA, is they might want to think about some kind of system that comes out with, who's actually the best organization to be doing that, not just who survives the pass-fail. But the most important thing I think this board can put forward is it really needs to be a single organization for the county. We can't be dividing ourselves up. In fact, I'm kind of wondering if multiple CACs actually meets the Fed requirements relative to that, because, they're supposed to be, isn't there a federal statute about having a citizen?
No, it's in our waiver and it's
Yeah.
in the state legislation,
Okay.
but it's not federal.
Okay, because I was a little, as I'm trying to think about some of the background statutory things that drive why you have a CAC, having multiple CACs for the same jurisdiction would be very odd.
Yes.
So
we agree.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you a few questions then. How much money is involved in all this? Is there a lot of money involved in this, and who's paying who? I mean, I thought it was really great when Trillium contributed the money for the clinics. You told us that, and that was over $2 million. So I'm thinking, well, this is involving a lot of money. So what is it? Is it an annual give us some idea of who's paying who in this thing and how much?
So, and I'm on the finance committee at Trillium, and Ron sits there with me too. So between the two of us, we can paint the large picture and the micro picture. Start with the county. When we looked at our budget for current year, it's around $18 million current year. So like, we're not getting a new clinic this year or any of those significant investments, but between the money that goes to public health and the money that supports our coordination at Trillium Behavioral Health and the direct payments to the community health centers, it's about $18 million. So Trillium is the largest single funder to Health and Human Services.
So this is money, this $18 million is going from Trillium
Right.
to the
To
county?
Lane County.
Okay,
And so the other part of the question, so the state basically sends the global budget, so that's almost all of the Medicaid money. There's still a few people in Lane County who have what's called open card, so they're not in the CCO. But for the bulk of people who are on Medicaid in Lane County, all of the money for behavioral health, physical health, and oral health goes to the CCO. There are dental care organizations who then are capitated for the dental part of that, so.
so this is money that goes from the state to
Right,
Trillium.
to
How much is
And then
that?
Trillium, you know what the total annual budget for Trillium is? I can't remember.
I would not want to quote, I don't recall.
Right.
It's
You know,
certainly
and-
discoverable. It's
Yeah,
over
and
a
I
half
can
billion.
send
It's
you
over
an
$500 million.
email with the
Almost half a
actual
billion?
dollar amounts,
Yeah.
but yes, it's a lot of money.
Well, just give us a range,
A little over half a billion.
low to high.
You know, I hate to do that because this is on the
Okay.
record then, and if I'm off by serious magnitude, but I will
Okay.
absolutely follow up in an email.
Okay.
It's a lot of
It's a big number.
money, it's a big number.
Okay,
So then the Trillium pays claims out of that, hospital payments, primary care payments.
and
payments
they
for
pay
prevention.
the Lane County $18 million.
Right.
Okay. And buy us 2 health clinics on top of that.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And, part of our
That's
MLK,
confused, yeah.
right,
Now, what about this business of you have oral, you have health problems, you have mental health problems, you have physical health problems. What's wrong with having 3 of these? One to deal with mental health, that are used to dealing with mental health. One to deal with dentists and oral health and the dentistry, and one, what's wrong with that kind of
How do we
competition?
coordinate care?
Yeah.
So that's how it was for a long time. And,
Well, it
my
couldn't be
view
too
is-
long, because we've only been on, this is the first round. It can't be too long.
Well, no, I mean, prior to CCOs.
It was
Oh, fine.
separate.
The
Yeah,
state
yeah.
had separate contracts with each of those entities. And first of all, there's a lot of reduplication or duplication. Secondly, you can't coordinate care. There's just too many more places, too many more gaps for patients to fall into. So the opportunity to get rid of those gaps is really one of the big drivers of pulling together a global budget and saying we're going to fund it all this way. And then you can add individual metrics that you all work toward. So we didn't have that sense of 17 incentivized metrics, lower your diabetes scores and improve your blood pressure scores, and we're all working together on that.
Okay. I'll just say that it seems like it's highly oriented to what I would call physical health, that mental health is too small relative to physical health, that oral health is too small. So it's really oriented to one arena of health and health problems and not towards all of them. So I know that we've heard some view that we need one, and I get that, but I also think that there's some components of the mental health system in particular, but also the oral health where, wait a minute, it's all being dominated by the physical health component of this whole thing.
Well, and if I may say, for CCO 2020, OHA has been very clear that the focus is going to be behavioral health and also more dental integration, as well as really looking at the social determinants of health. So what you're saying is primarily true, and it's no longer going to be that case.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so do we want to have another round, or are we good?
I just wanted to say one quick thing was a follow-up to my first question. So I agree that one care organization makes the most sense. And if we want to write a letter to that, I would support that. In addition to that, what I find a little bit frustrating about the process in general is that should it again be one care organization for all of our county, we as the people that in Lane County that service that entity don't really have a say in who that is. And if it truly is a pass-fail type of, scoring process at the state level, I don't think that's enough. I think we need to have, some more input if that's truly the case. And we should have input on who we want to serve our community. I don't know if we can put that kind of feedback in any kind of letter, or somehow communicate that to the state, but I think that's really important.
And I believe that AOC submitted, either AOC did, and I'm trying to remember their exact letter, or I know certainly the Tri-Counties had expressed a similar opinion before the procurement process opened up. So I think you're not alone in that opinion.
That was a letter I recused from participating in.
Okay, so Commissioner Burney?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you implied that the state potentially could select more than one. Is that in fact, is that true? Might the state choose to create a complicated, okay.
Yes, in the RFA itself, it includes an attachment that talks about how lives will be assigned in case they choose multiple ones. So they are absolutely contemplating that possibility. They're not required to submit or to appoint more than one, but they have left the door open to do that.
Don't other regions already have that?
They do.
Yes, and their focus is really coming from OHA, is they want not only members to be able to have a choice in terms of providers, but they want members to have choice in terms of CCOs.
So, thank you. So the second part of that is that if this board agrees with your, and I don't know, but if we agree with your criteria, want to weigh in on having one with as much impact as possible, and also I would absolutely agree with Heather's point. So if we vote on that, what happens? Do you write us a letter for, how does that work, and how do we get that letter to the right people in time?
So, and Steve and I talked some about that, and that's a piece of why we wanted to have the work session today, to give us enough time to make sure if you wanted to send a letter, we get that to OHA before the 22nd of April, which is when they close their process. So we certainly can draft that letter and bring it back to the next board meeting to have your approval and sign it. I mean, that's what we contemplated, assuming you want to see it or when.
So you'd get a draft letter back?
No, thank you.
Before it went.
I thought that was a dumb question, but I just didn't.
Okay, so, let's just,
Let's, gonna make a motion to that effect then.
okay, very good, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to create that letter in our support of, one provider. In addition, with the comments that I expressed earlier about having local input in their scoring process.
Second.
Okay,
Beat me to
moved
it.
by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Burney.
Mr. Chair, I will recuse from this decision.
Okay,
Sorry, the question from the county administrator to me was whether there were other elements for the letter. I don't know that it's necessarily for the letter. I would like clarity before I leave about your support for those four criteria, and that essentially on your behalf, if an entity is unwilling to meet those four elements, then we would not sign an MOU with that particular applicant.
I'm wondering, Karen, whether there's been any discussion with either the oral health care providers, the mental health care providers, or the doctors and physical clinics about whether or not they support the idea of one. In other words, the motion as I'm piecing it together, the motion is we want to write a letter to say we want one CCO. And I'm getting at that having 4 CCOs may not be the greatest, but I'm wondering about the relationship that we have as county commissioners with the behavioral health providers, the physical health providers, and the dentists and the whole oral health care providers, of whether they think this is a good idea. I mean, obviously, from a county perspective, why don't we just have one for the whole state? It'd be even easier, right? Why have several? Okay, well, the idea is, well, maybe it should be more local. And so I'm just posing this before I really want to vote on this to say, are they in favor of having one?
So I specifically raised that question with a group called the Consortium of Behavioral Health Providers. So
Yes.
that's mostly the nonprofit providers in the community, including Peace Health. There may be some others there, but that group meets monthly and represents that sector. And there was absolute support from that group that having a single CCO was of interest to them for a lot of the same reasons of, they would have to bill multiple places, they would have, whatever prior authorization processes, all of that, they would have to duplicate in their agencies if there were more than one. So I vetted it with them. I don't know that I've talked to primary care docs. I don't know if you've had any of those conversations.
Not in a formal way like you have. Specialists are, maybe Ron can speak about it too. It's interesting that if we end up with 2, 3, or 4, specialty groups who already have contracts with various payers, et cetera, they're already aligning with one particular CCO or another in anticipation of what may happen. So there could be challenges, especially with specialty care, if we have multiple providers.
So I haven't posed that question in the dental community, but
Well,
behavioral health.
and I know that other clinics which are much smaller, South Lane Mental Health would be an example of that. There may be a difference in the attitudes of the small clinics and small scale providers as opposed to Peace Health. Okay.
Well, and South Lane is on the behavioral health consortium, so, and you're right. I mean, there's a little bit of a mixed bag. People that are used to working with multiple payers are a little bit more open, although very skeptical of 4. But really, our primary providers in behavioral health and physical health that are primarily Medicaid are not in favor of having more than one CCO. And that's come up in multiple committee meetings that I'm involved in. And our staff that works with a lot of the DCOs, so that is the dental portion, they are not also in favor of having more than one CCO. For all the same reasons of all the complication that happens when you have those duplicate services.
Okay, good. Is this something you anticipate we would be doing today, is directing a letter be written saying one?
Yes.
That's something you wanted to do? Okay.
Which the
Yes.
motions.
I will amend the motion to add your 4 points so that you have clear direction as well.
Yeah, so I just want to say I support the motion for the letter, and, I kind of feel like in part of that, your letter wanting to direct about having local input, those are kind of like the local ratings that I'd like to see, who's going to deliver best on these 4 things, when you talk about, how would we want to rank the 4 applications. This is, the 4 criteria I would lay out as ranking criteria, so I support adding those into your motion, so. And I guess I would ask the second one if he agrees.
The second agrees.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I do have a point after the vote is taken.
Okay, very good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. Vote is 3-1. Commissioner Farr not participating. Commissioner Sorensen voting no. The motion is adopted by the board, and we'll get you to write it and put it on the agenda when it's written. Okay, go ahead.
Just a
Mr.
quick point, and I'll look at a former legislator, fellow former legislator. The frustration that you expressed, Commissioner, regarding the state's sometimes insular decision-making that doesn't necessarily react or respond to local needs and local requirements or local requests, is one that we've had for years, and not just in healthcare. It's been across the board in education and all of the things that the state has its thumb on the revenue flow. That sometimes the people who are making the decisions don't seem to be attuned to the local needs. And I'm saying that in a very light fashion. I could say it much harsher than that, using different words. But in fact, I think OHA tends to be a little bit more responsive. That's been my experience. In no small part because we do have a local contact who lives 2 blocks away from me, Bobby Green. I mean, I do feel that we have more input with OHA than we do, for instance, with the Department of Education. Although I love Colt Gill too. I've known him for a lot of years.
Okay.
I just want to point out that identifying this criteria is really critical to having influence in the final decision. Because I just was asking Karen, and it's our understanding that OHA is, having a signed MOU with the county is a pass-fail marker. And so for any applicant that doesn't meet these criteria, they wouldn't have a signed MOU, and so that would likely disqualify them from moving forward. So I think this is at least a first step in having a fair amount of influence in the outcome.
Okay. Glenn?
Oh, I was just going to say, Karen and group, your strategical posture, I can observe from the outside, and it's very much admired and appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll move on then, and if Mr. Mokrahysky, if you could alert our legal team to come up here. I think we have a short executive session. I hope it's short.
I do have a
Think-
12:30.
You have a 12:30, okay. We'll try to acquaint them with that. While we are,
The diabetes reference wasn't.
do we have any other review of assignments? I don't think so. I think we did it. Okay, so let's do another recess until the lawyers get here. How about, what's a good estimate?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
Couple hours.
5 minutes.
Because I gotta go in an hour.
Well, we're welcome back from our meeting that we are trying to get through. And so I will say this is still Wednesday, March 20th. And Mr. Administrator, let's go back to our adjustments to the agenda and make sure we're finishing everything we need to finish in public session before we go into our executive session.
I think we've done everything, just a review of assignments. The one assignment I had was that staff will draft a letter to bring back to the board that would go from the board to the Oregon Health Authority supporting the criteria for CCOs as was discussed in the presentation.
Very good.
And supporting the selection of one versus many.
Yes, I'm including that in the criteria,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that'll be on our next agenda, regular agenda. Is that correct?
Depending on how quickly they can.
Yeah, it may be.
Okay.
As soon as the next agenda.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to distinguish from our next regular meeting versus our next special meeting, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Very good. All right, so are we now ready to go into our executive session? Mr. Administrator. Okay, so at this time, the Lane County Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on consultations with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D and H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session. As previously announced, no decision may be made in executive session. The Board of Commissioners reserves the right to come back out of executive session into public session should the need arise, although we do not currently envision that to be the case, and we are now going into our executive session. So we're recessing the public session, going into executive session, and we will likely adjourn the meeting at the conclusion of the executive session.